So welcome back to my two-part video about getting started 3D printing, and honestly I'm glad now in reflection that I've split this into two parts because I think a lot of people probably know what the original video was about. That's generally just covering how a 3D printer works, whereas this time we're going to cover what the post-processing is like. So as a brief recap, as I'm not a beginner anymore, I met up with Guy from the Midwinter Minis channel, drove down to his house in Colchester and walked him through the setup of a 3D printer and got perfect prints off it straight away. If you've missed out on that and you're interested in the journey, go and check out my previous video. But right now, let's get into it because we're going to have a look at what it takes to get printers off the print bed once they're printed to on your tabletop, because there are some things we need to go through. So thanks again to Guy for hosting me and to Uniformation for sponsoring this video. Please don't forget to check out Midwinter Minis if you haven't already. It's a fantastic channel, much larger than mine, and I'm proud to be featured on it. But me, who am I? I'm Ross, and this is Faux Hammer Videos? So anyway, after setting up the printer and starting off some prints, I went back to Guy's that evening and played some Hero Quest with him and his friends, and we had a little bit of a disagreement over what the rules were, and according to the commenters on my channel, I was right. Though I'm sure if he had comments on his channel about who was right, it might go a little bit of a different way. Anyway, let's move on. We've got some prints. What do we do now? As I said the night before, we just threw some models on the printer and clicked go, and this is all thanks to the GK2. It's got its convenience features, but the key element was the fact that because it's got a chamber heater, it means that I knew the environment it'd be printed in. We're using the same resin, the same printer, same environment temperature, so in that case, my settings can just be ported over to his printer. Fantastic, and I don't mind talking up the GK2 in a sponsored video because I've been doing it now for over a year for free, so if they want to pay me to talk about it more, I'm gonna say yes. If the printer ever gets trumped by another one, I'll tell you why for free, but right now, still the best printer. Go and check out my review for more info. Or anyone's review for that matter. I haven't seen anyone say it's bad, so, pay attention to this printer. But anyway, getting back to it, the part I alluded to earlier is the cleanup process with 3D printing can be a pain. Now before I arrived at Guy's, I recommended that he grab a large pickle jar and a silicone baking tray from Amazon, and I took him a bottle of odorless methylated spirits myself. Now as I walk you through the cleaning process, remember you must not get resin on your skin. If you do, wash it off thoroughly as soon as possible. Now, when you remove your vat from a printer, it can drip resin, which can end up on you and or on your floor. Once again, you need to avoid touching this stuff, so good luck finding drops in the carpet when you're looking for them later. And this is why I recommended the silicone baking tray. Large silicone mats are great for having a work area to help you remove the prints from the build plate without having still uncured residue touching your worktops. Now I usually use a large silicone mat for this, but the tray with its rigid frame also gives you a large area you can put beneath your build plate to catch any drips as you move it to your prep surface. And the tray actually kind of doubles as your prep surface anyway, and because it's got raised edges, it prevents any of the resin from going outside of this area. This is a great 2-in-1 tool, but without this, at least grab yourself a silicone mat as a prep area. You can grab a 3D printed one for about $20 or $30, or you can get an Amazon Basics silicone dog food mat for less than a tenner. Also, if you've got a printer where the brand are being really cheap, you might have plastic slidey feet, in which case this is also a useful surface area to stand it on. But once it's in this area, just slide your putty knife under it, and so long as you've got your base layer's exposure time dialed in right, I've got a different video on that, we're not going into it here, but it should just get under the edge of your support layers, and they should slide off easily without having to break any of the resin in doing so. Make sure you're wearing gloves throughout this entire process because, again, resin can splash everywhere. This has already become quite messy, and that's just getting the model off the build plate. Now, washing. And just like my own Wargamer resin, there are other water washable resins out there, so you don't need special or harmful chemicals, but water washable resins have a couple of drawbacks. One is that they are water absorbent, so you can't leave them sat in water for too long without them becoming brittle, and two is that harmful chemicals are still much better at cleaning them. And you may have heard people talk about cleaning prints with isopropanol, and that's fine, but over time I've found that the better solution is industrial grade odorless methylated spirit. And the reason this is better in my opinion is, unlike isopropanol, which becomes cloudy over time within a few months, if not weeks, your whole vat will turn into a mix of resiny sludge, methylated spirit stays clean and non-sludgy forever. I've actually used the same vat and a follow-up ultrasonic cleaner for well over a year without changing the fluid once. But I think the thing that helps the most is a 2-stage wash cycle, and this is why I recommended the pickle jar, which is also a fun YouTube channel you might want to check out. You see, the more resin you can get off your model in smaller volumes of cleaning agent, the better. I heavily slosh my model in a meths-filled pickle jar first before moving them to a more powerful cleaner. Well, actually, now I've been doing this for years, I've got 2 pickle jars, so now I do a first rinse, a second rinse, then an ultrasonic bath to clean out the deepest recesses. But if you have nothing else and are just starting, you can get away with just one large pickle jar. Then, when you're ready, get a second. Then, get a proper wash unit, which normally comes as a wash and cure bundle. But once your models are thoroughly rinsed and you've got all of the liquid resin off the surfaces and out of the recesses, and even the inside, assuming you hollowed your model, which is an option you can do in your slicer, you then need to do the final cure. And before you do this, make sure you've left your models out to dry on a surface, because that will be able to tell you whether or not you've got fully cleaned models. All of the surfaces should appear to be the same texture, and you can normally tell what's still liquid resin as it has a gloopy glossiness, and you can still see it in the recesses. If you really want to push it to the nth degree and get everything out, it should be fine so long as you're sloshing it around a lot in some good cleaning fluid. But if you really want to push it to the next degree, you can blow it out with an airbrush, you can use a toothbrush to clean out the recesses, just don't ever use that again in your mouth, or you can even use a spritz bottle to try and spray into some of the deeper areas. The point is, you want as much, if not every last piece of liquid resin off and out of this model before we do the next stage, because whatever we do here is now fully committed and what your model's going to look like forever. Now, the main reason we need to cure is because even when cleaned and dried, the surfaces of the model still contain traces of resin which isn't fully cured. And again, you should not get this stuff on your skin, so for all of this process, you are still wearing gloves. Now, if you are a beginner and you're just getting into resin printing, you can cure prints out in the sun, but depending on where you live, this could take anything from a few to several hours, if not days. What people tend to do at first is opt for more DIY options. Buying a UV curing station for nail art is common. My first curing station, I put a UV LED strip inside a paint tin with a solar powered turntable at the bottom. But the best option is a dedicated curing station, which, as mentioned previously, normally comes bundled with a wash station too. There are cheap options and expensive options, but I've stopped reviewing these in general because they all do the same thing, and the price differences only tend to reflect the size or the build quality of the housing and mechanics. Until somebody invents one of these that suddenly makes me go, oh my god, wow, I just don't see much point in covering them. Get the biggest one you can afford that you can fit in your home. And then the final thing you need to know is that whilst you shouldn't touch the resin itself because of its toxicity, whilst the resin's curing, the reaction will also produce volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, which pump into the air. Now, some printers are sealed, others are sealed and have inbuilt carbon filters, but even they only do so much to reduce the potential hazards in the air. Whilst going through this process with Guy, it wasn't actually the resin curing VOCs that were so bad, but it was the methylated spirits which caused his Dyson air filter to skyrocket into the red levels and remain there for several hours despite both windows being open. Now, I have no idea how sensitive this particular air filter is, and as Guy told me himself, he's seen reports that this thing can jump into the red levels just from somebody changing their carpet. But regardless, I think the long story short is that you don't want to be sat all day breathing this stuff in. How hazardous this stuff is anyone's guess, because even I'm yet to see content from a reliable and trusted source about how harmful the chemicals from this process are. Now on the grapevine, I've heard everything from the volume of pollutants in the process is so small it can't possibly affect you, to we're all gonna die! And the truth is, guys, I've got no idea. So when you embark on this process, do so at your own comfort level. For me, I pump fumes outside using an extractor, but for a long time I was sat in the same room with several printers running and just left the window open. Other people use hydroponics grow tents to house their printers in and do the same by pumping the fumes outside. Others may only use the printer in a garage or shed, but then you're back to the combating temperature issues. So you do you in regard to this process, but if you have any pets or kids, be wary, especially in regard to dripping liquid resin on the floor where they may play, walk, or even lick. Now as I look back over the resin printing process, which has actually taken 2 videos, I saw it more and more from Guy's point of view as he's more of a beginner. It does look arduous and messy just from this overview, but I have added a lot of why certain best practices work along with some options for people too. So whilst it's long, I've probably gone into a bit more detail than the brief overview. Once you get your head around it and go through it once, it really is just a case of get a printer, dial in the settings, slice, print, clean, wash and cure, with those last 4 steps being quite rinse and repeat. You literally just slice, print, wash and cure. You don't need to buy a printer or reconfigure your settings every time. But you will need gloves for each step of every stage, and it's why I do most of my stuff in batches now. This whole process did open my eyes to just how daunting this could be to somebody coming at this fresh, and with the potential risks involved, I completely understand that this is not everyone's cup of tea, far from it. Printers are slowly getting easier to use, with manufacturers adopting much of this stuff which has been DIY for ages directly into their hardware, with resin heaters being the latest popular addition. Next, we need to see brands adopt better filtration systems and just options in general. Now, in all honesty, I hope this video hasn't put you off resin printing, but I also hope it hasn't encouraged you either. Many people love it, many others hate it. Both choices are absolutely fine, so long as you choose what's right for you. All I wanted to do was give you an honest and unfiltered journey so that you can make the most informed decisions, and if you decide to go for it, know what you're going to have to get alongside the printer to get everything working. Which is basically a printer, probably a decent USB drive, a silicone tray or mat, and a couple of pickle jars along with a ton of gloves at the very least. Beyond that, you can get a wash and cure station when you're ready. I'd honestly love to know what you think after going through these 2 videos. Is resin printing for you? Again, either option's fine, but it'd be great to weigh up what people have come out of the back of this video thinking. Have I changed your mind from what you thought before? I want to say thanks for watching, and especially to our members who help us afford to make these videos and are just generally wonderful people for giving me money every month in order to put their name up in lights, but they do get priority comment replies too, along with early access. Please consider joining them with the button below this video unless you're on the iOS app, in which case check the video on a PC to join. I want to say thanks to Guy for hosting me, and thanks to Uniformation for sponsoring this video. Until next time, broadsword! Fohammer out.